There are many voices in the old state capitol, voices that shape the meaning of freedom. History connects us with those voices so that we can be inspired to make a difference in the world today and in the future. As you move throughout the historic rooms of the old state capitol, we hope it encourages you to think about what it's like to follow in the footsteps of those who came before you, to think about issues from the perspective of someone else's point of view. And we hope it inspires you to consider the important stories of freedom that transpired in this very historic place. The old state capitol served as the fifth state house of the state of Illinois from 1840 until 1876. This is where all the operations of state government came together. We have the judicial branch in the meetings of the Supreme Court. We have the legislative branch in the houses for the representatives and the senators. And then finally, we have the executive branch covered by the office of the governor and the office of the treasurer, office of the secretary of state. This is where power disseminated from for all of our citizens. What often doesn't come out immediately to people are the tremendously important events that happened here historically that really shaped the way we see the world today. Probably the greatest among those would be the delivery of Lincoln's House Divided speech in the summer of 1858. It was a hot summer, temperatures were rising, but more importantly, the temperature of the country was rising due to the spread of slavery. There's almost no way that Lincoln could have known the impact that that speech would have, that we'd still be here talking about it so many years later, and that politicians would be looking back at his very words, borrowed from the Bible, but at his words that gave symbolism to a country struggling to deal with itself, literally pulling itself apart. Perhaps more than anything else, other than the House Divided speech, is the passage of the 13th Amendment that outlawed slavery everywhere. Most people aren't aware that Illinois was the first state to step forward to ratify the 13th Amendment. That happening on its own is tremendously significant, but what happened afterward makes the event incredible. Because of the presence of a Chicago businessman named John Jones, Illinois did something that was truly remarkable in going beyond the ratification of the 13th Amendment. They also set their minds to eliminating some of the restrictions on civil liberties that existed on Illinois law for free blacks living in this state.
We had passed, from actually before statehood, a series of laws that were called the Black Laws. The Black Laws just discriminated against African Americans, so much so that by 1853 they couldn't serve on a jury, they couldn't serve in the militia, they couldn't even come to the state of Illinois. And if they didn't have the proper paperwork, if they were already here, they could actually be sold back into slavery, even if they'd never been a slave. The Black Laws were awful. All the northern states had black laws. We may not have had slavery per se, but all the northern states had black laws, and Illinois were the worst. Well, that same week that the General Assembly ratified the 13th Amendment, we also voted to repeal most of those black laws. And so, again, another story that deserved to be told.
We call that first week in February, historically, one amazing week. It's arguable that there's no other period in our state's history when so much was done to change what it means to be free here in Illinois. And it happened inside the old state capitol.
My name is Ashton Burdell, and music was always a big part of my life. I had actually seen the Lincoln Troubadours before I even became a part of them, and I said, I want to do that someday. It was the neatest experience. We were an 8-part a cappella group, and we all interacted together to tell the story about Abraham Lincoln and his time up through the campaign trail. And it was really neat to be able to have a very interactive program that works so well with tourists in the area.
I was able to represent my United States Colored Troop. After the Emancipation Proclamation, it gave the Union Army the opportunity to raise up colored troops to help fight, for their freedom. And our job was to portray those soldiers, tell those stories from a perspective that not too many people get to hear about every day. You can talk about Abraham Lincoln, but you can also talk about that other side of the people that he actually impacted and the impact that they were able to have, on the country as a whole.
I think one of my favorite things about the building is the evidence that it's left behind. While we have thousands of artifacts that help populate the rooms and give them historic feel, we have numerous pieces of evidence in our Illinois State Archives, which we partner with to help connect people with the past.
I'm the director of the Illinois State Archives. And what that means is we're in charge of records management for the state of Illinois, and we're also in charge of the permanent state records. You never know what a historian is going to find that's important, and a good example of that is we have pay warrants for an individual named William Butler. Well, William Butler was a janitor here. Okay. Is that as important as a Lincoln document? Well, it is. It helps tell the story of William Butler. Outside the old state capitol, he was a leader for civil rights at a time when African Americans couldn't vote, at a time when African Americans were still discriminated against, at a time when African Americans were enslaved. Well, now you've got the basis of a story. So this document tells you what he got paid, okay? And that's about all the information you're gonna find out about him. But holding this document and knowing it exists tells you a little bit more about William Butler, but it'll also inspire you to want to know more. And that's an amazing feeling.
History continues to be made in the old state capitol by events like naturalization ceremonies and community gatherings with organizations like the NAACP and our law enforcement organizations.
I came to the United States in 1999, originally from Santiago, Chile. The naturalization ceremony for me and my daughter happened in different years, and it was here. And it was incredible because this is 2 centuries after Lincoln did the House Divided speech. It doesn't get any better than that. It's amazing. But it's also the culmination, the realization of a dream. When you're an immigrant or a refugee and you have worked and given back to the community, the one thing that makes you feel that you wholly belong to your community is becoming a citizen. And that is not just because it gives you the rights and responsibilities that any other person that was born in the United States has, but it also gives you the power to vote. So if you're gonna become a citizen, and that is just like in itself amazing, doing it here was incredible because of the history of the building.
After Ferguson's situation, the Michael Brown situation, we recognized and realized that could be Springfield. It was just an hour and a half away, and people across the country were angry. So to have Black police officers and white police officers and plainclothes individuals to come together to talk about the disparities, to talk about what was happening in the community made a difference. So we began to break down our myths, our stereotypes, our barriers, what were we afraid of? And from there, we said we have to take this to another level. So we developed some principles. One of the principles says we all value human life. All of the police agencies and all of the NAACP across the state came together in this building, in this location, and stood up there with President Lincoln. And it was like he was alive and he was just empowering us and motivating us. And we talked about those principles. And then we signed a living, working document. All that took place right here in this room. And we are so pleased. Years later, we are still accomplishing our goals.
This building is essential to Illinois and Springfield, and a great example of that is in 2007. This was the place Barack Obama chose to make his presidential announcement. I mean, that speaks volumes to my mind about the old state capitol and about its central role in Illinois. The 1970 Constitutional Convention, they met here, Okay, this is not a building that you put on a shelf to gather dust. This is a building where things are still happening. The Old State Capitol Art Fair takes place on the lawn around the building. Blues and barbecue. It's a part of this community. It's a big part of this state. It's a great tool to teach people, but it's still relevant. It's not just history in this building. And to me, that's the most important part of this.
What we hope people can learn from visiting the Old State Capitol and connecting with the history of this important place is that history can be a dialogue that we can be engaged in. It's an ongoing struggle, just like Lincoln articulated in the House Divided speech, for us to move forward as one country, united under our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. We need to be in contact with our history, essentially having conversations with those who came before us, looking at what they wrote down, studying what they did. It helps stabilize our country, but it also helps give our future generations a place to look to when they're charting the course of our country in the future.
We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him as we breathe our evening prayer. When a year ago we gathered, joy was in his mild blue eye, but a golden cord is severed, and our hopes in ruins lie. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him as we breathe our evening prayer. At our fireside sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell in remembrance of a story, how a noble lily fell, how we strove to bear our banner through the thickest of the fight, and uphold our country's honor in the strength of manhood's might. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him as we breathe our evening prayer. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. We miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him as we breathe our evening prayer. As we breathe our evening prayer. There will be